Even though the market is saturated and that can be a reason to not enter the space or to expand within the space, at the end of the day, if you're able to put a really great product out there, you will always get customers.
Welcome to Marketing Made Iconic, guys, and into our tourism series where we're talking to real people behind the brands shaping the future of tourism and travel. And I'm really pleased to introduce Esther Kieft from Nelly Woods Collective Stays on the potty today. And I'm really excited to hear about her journey, and you guys will really enjoy hearing some of what Esther has to say from setting up Nelly Woods Collective Stays initially as an Airbnb and as a brand in itself, but also the detail and the journey she's been through going to Tassie most recently. And yeah, and your as in your individual unique kind of journey from a career in product, I think, and even starting in finance to now running this amazing closed day in a gym in a B&B business. So we'll definitely talk about the Tassie trip and all the exciting bits about that. But let's talk about Nelly Woods Collective Stays. Firstly, where did the idea come from for Nelly Woods Collective Stays? And what was that moment where you decided to go all in?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Super excited to be on this episode today and to share our journey. In terms of Nelly and Woods Collective Stays, my husband and I, we were traveling and having a holiday during the pandemic and going up the Fraser Coast and staying in all of these beautiful Airbnbs. And my husband was always really keen to have something that was his and not being tied to an employer. And with his hospitality background, we're like, wait, we could probably do this ourselves. What's stopping us? We're the type of people, once we have an idea, we go all guns blazing into it. So we were already on realestate.com during the holiday. We had our first open home, visiting it on the last day of our holiday,
Wow.
specifically looking for a two dwelling property. We were keen to buy something where there was already a second dwelling on the property, which we could convert into an Airbnb. And that's when we came
Yeah.
across our property in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. And so for us, it took 3 months to get the first slow stay Into the Woods up and running. And over the years, because Into the Woods has been up and running for over 4 years now, it really, for me, sparked this joy in entrepreneurship that I had never had. So even though I was still working full time in corporate, it sparked this curiosity for being an entrepreneur. And the final push in terms of when we went all in was really when my previous employer was having another restructure. And it was that kind of final push to say, let's give it our full attention now. We were already in the process of building our second slow stay Nelly as well. And we were just settling on the property in Tasmania. So it all came together. And I think I needed that final push also from a confidence perspective to go all in.
Yeah, definitely not a bit of a scary move, I would have thought. And like I was saying before, I love how you put so much attention into the detail. What do you think makes the space collective rather than just another rental or retreat?
I think for us, a collective is really about connection. So, not just offering a space, but also this connection to people, the place that you're in, but also the values that we have. So, it's very much a founder led business. So, we make all the decisions, all the detail, the story, everything comes from us directly. And that's also reflected in
Mhm.
all of the channels that we're on, including our social media, where we try to share us as hosts, but also extend beyond just our stays, but give a little bit of a sneak peek into who we are as individuals and our lives outside of our hosting journey, which we find our audience really connects with and makes it a lot more personable. So I think moving away from just seeing it as being an accommodation provider, offering a bed, but that collective experience is super important. And having strong storytelling that supports that through different channels. And whilst all of the spaces are very much unique, they do all carry the same philosophy. And we were really keen to extend that to our newest stay in Tasmania. So instead of hiring an interior designer or hiring a team to do the renovation, we were really intentional about doing it ourselves, which, to be honest, with the amount of time it took, was probably less cost effective because of the amount of time we had it to operate as a business. But we knew we would lose that authenticity of it being a stay that we've built ourselves. So we were really keen to retain that.
Yeah, nice. And is that part of how you balance the aesthetics and authenticity in a space where there's quite a few design-led stays?
Yeah, 100%. I think over the years, there's more and more design led accommodations. And that's something I think about a lot. The fact that's growing hugely. But at the same time, from a host perspective, it's easy to be overwhelmed by that. But it shows that there's a strong appetite from a customer perspective to stay in an accommodation that is design led. So I think the key is to not start from a place of comparison or imitation, but really to start from who you are as an individual. And ultimately, if there's only one person that can tell your story and provide your perspectives and your influences, so as long as you stick to that, then you'll be able to bring that authenticity. But at the same time, I think also not focusing too much on what is trendy. So being brave to try new things, to experiment, and to be bold with your design choices. That's a way to really bring in authenticity and not just present a stay that's pretty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you make it sound a bit easy, but it probably isn't. Like getting all the details and actually putting your personality or a different or unique kind of building that environment in the stay for guests is, and yeah, getting all those details pulled nicely together is probably harder than one might think, especially if you
Yeah.
don't have interior design in your blood.
Yeah, I think I probably benefit from the fact that my mom's very creative, and I've always loved going to design museums and following interior design accounts. And I lived in Finland for 5 years where I developed like a strong passion for Scandinavian design, even though that isn't necessarily reflected in the stays. But I
Yeah.
think having that natural curiosity for how you create a space that makes you feel and have a sense of emotion as opposed to just looking good, it requires quite a lot of thought. So I always
Mm.
say to other hosts is when you walk into a new space or to your into your own space, how does it make you feel? Does the light feel off? Do you have soft lighting? Is it really bright? What's the first thing that catches your eye? Is that the first thing you want a guest to focus on when they enter a space? What does it smell like?
Yeah.
Does it smell fresh? Does it reflect the environment that it's in? So that there's a lot of
Yeah.
considerations, but at the end of the day, it comes back down to the senses. It's what you smell, what you around you, and playing into that with the amenities and the design choices that you make for the space.
Yeah, and that's really what people take away with them and what they will subconsciously and consciously remember, I think.
Yes,
And
agreed.
yeah.
And I think that's what differentiates a stay where you're just looking for a bed, a place to sleep from an entire experience. In the moment, you might say, "Oh, yeah, I had a nice time." But when you can elevate it into it feeling like an entire experience, that's where it becomes a memory and you take something away from it and you continue to reflect on that time and time again.
Yeah, I love that. And behind the scenes, as we've indicated, there's a lot that goes on. It's often hosting is often a bit romanticized, I think. But behind the scenes, running a business like this can be sometimes complex, especially if you want to grow with intention. So tell us what surprised you most about the business side of running boutique accommodation?
I think for me, what surprised me from a business perspective is how personal it can feel. I've always been a high performer in corporate, and I had a really great business coach that said that's your greatest asset, but it's also your greatest weakness, that you're always looking to please. And within the hosting business, it's really easy to want to go above and beyond for every guest. And one of the values that we do have is that every guest that comes through the door, that they feel like they are the first guest experiencing the space. But there is a fine line between generosity and sustainability for us from a business and from a profitability perspective. And a really good learning point for me was quite early on, when it was in during Cyclone Alfred, we had guests that were checking into one of our stays who weren't able to check in on the day that they had planned to, so they were delayed. They had travel insurance, but they were still looking for a partial refund. And in that situation, my inclination is, yeah, sure. Let me just refund you. And it was really at that point in time that my husband stepped in and said, no, Esther, this is a business that we're operating. We have a cancellation policy for a reason, and these are the reasons why guests have travel insurance. And so I think making the business a little bit less personal in terms of how I respond to negative situations or situations that are outside of my control has been super important and a learning curve for me over the last year. And I do agree. I think hosting gets romanticized as it all just being about this wonderful experience that you create for guests, but there is a lot that happens behind the scenes, and the most successful hosts really do see what they're doing as a business, and you need to be conscious of that bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah. And you mentioned sustainable and sustainable growth. How do you approach that growth, especially as demand increases and guests expect more?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for us, we had to learn that quite quickly when we scaled to 3 stays. I remember I was in Tassie, and because we still run the operations for our Sunshine Coast stays, my husband was here. We have a toddler that we have to take care of, and we're pretty much fully booked out at both of our stays in the Sunshine Coast. And I just remember being on a video call, and there was some mishaps on from an operational perspective, and I just felt completely out of control, that all of the cards were falling down. And I remember even saying to my husband, what do we do? And we were starting to see it reflect in our reviews for our first day for Into the Woods, where we were starting to get more 4-star reviews. And for us, that was a huge red flag because we realized we were spending all of our attention on our second stay that had just opened in February. We were renovating in Tassie, but we weren't giving our first stay the same level of attention that guests had become used to and were expecting from us, and also what distinguished us from a lot of other providers in the area. So at that point, we really had a bit of a reflection point and said, we're going to have to slow down our plans for Tasmania and how quickly we're renovating the space so that we can better balance our time and make the growth more sustainable, where we're able to give enough attention to what we've already built and protect that, because of ground, it's easy for it to take a turn if you don't protect it. And then if that means that we're not growing at the pace that we would like to from an enthusiasm perspective, we're just going to have to accept that. So I think that was for us a real point of reflection. Yes, we want to grow, but it can't be at the sacrifice of what we've already built.
It's like protecting and looking after your existing customer base, if you like.
Yeah.
Which in any industry, any business, in my opinion, is the number one priority, and it has to be.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And as well, as a host, you can't expect a guest to have empathy towards everything else that's going on in your life because at the end of the day, they have paid for a certain experience. As a host, you should be there to provide that. And they've put trust in you to provide that. We had to really rethink how we were approaching our growth. And we've learned a lot through that. And before we launched Tassie, we were really quick to say, oh, what about our fourth stay, our fifth stay? And now we're taking a step back and saying, no, actually, let's make sure that we can actually remotely manage a stay from another state, see how we can operationally have someone else run our stays in the Sunshine Coast to the quality and the level of experience that we would expect before we consider any further expansion plans. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
steep learning curve.
Yeah, but important. Do you have any particular systems and support that you've put in place now to assist with that and that's sustainably scaling?
Yeah, 100%. I think because I come from a technology and a product background, one of the first things that I did when we knew we were going to be scaling to 2 stays and then eventually 3 was how do we take some of the tedious admin type tasks and automate that as much as possible. So initially, Yost, my husband, he would grab every welcome email, which we had a template for, and he'd be copying and pasting that across. And I said to him, why are you doing that? That is such a waste of time. And he said, it literally takes me 5 seconds. I said, yeah, but you have to think about it. You have to personalize it. You need to manage expectations where it's being sent out at the same time. And if you don't send it, that directly impacts the experience. So automating all of that has been pretty critical to reduce the operate work involved
Yeah.
time for the creative and more personalized efforts that we do for our stays, which is ultimately what guests remember. So it's created a level of consistency where every guest gets the same communication at the same time, but at the same time, it frees up our time to focus on other areas. And we also integrated everything with Hostaway, which is a channel manager where you can manage everything centrally. And that's been
Nice.
critical for us on our journey to having our own booking website, our own website where guests can book directly with us, as well as to build an email subscriber list and to build more of a relationship with our guests, which is a lot more limited through Airbnb, booking.com, where the relationship for the guest is with the provider that they've booked through the brand. So yeah, we've definitely taken steps to introduce primarily technology to automate a lot of the tasks and processes where we can. And we're keen to explore even more partnerships on that front. Like I mentioned before, I was on a call with the US this morning for a new product that's just been launched. I think it's about a year ago, less than a year ago, called Happy Guests, where you can streamline the check-in process even further. So I think with
Nice.
technology, I love looking for new products that are out there that elevate that guest experience even further, be able to distinguish yourself as a host.
Yeah, and if you think about that guest experience, if you're relying on especially as you get busier and you're relying on your kind of human brain to remember, oh, I need to send this text and this email to give this guest a lovely experience. I can imagine automating that would just be not only a burden lifted off your mind, but actually give the guest a good experience without stressing your brains out.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen that in our reviews as well. Regularly, we get reviews that include how strong our communication is and how they appreciate the information that we share before the stay. And that has required some initial effort up front to set all of that up. And but after that, it's tweaking it and adjusting it where required. So it's definitely worth that initial investment.
Yeah. One of the things I love about what you do and how you do it is it's just if anybody comes across Nelly Nelly Woods Collective Stays, it'll be very obvious that you've taken it above, elevated it much further than just a overnight stay or just a bed to sleep in. You're creating spaces where people can breathe, connect, remember who they are, go off grid in some cases. Can you tell us more about how you design for this emotional impact and not just the visual appeal?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's appreciating, first of all, that a lot of guests are coming into a space where they're constantly switched on. They're in that 9 to 5 grind and they're not used to slowing down. So a lot of guests need that cue where if you're not in that mental state, you wouldn't necessarily need it. So that could be something as simple as putting some lounge chairs in front of a really beautiful view where someone who's in a certain mental state wouldn't think to just sit there and relax and enjoy the view, but you've created a space where it encourages the guests to do that. So it's those little prompts through amenities or design features that make a huge difference to how someone ends up spending their time within that space. And for me, when a guest comes back after their stay or in their review indicates we never even left and we had the best time ever, that's a huge compliment to me because our stays are surrounded by beautiful attractions where they could go out and do all of these things and have those impulses to do that as they normally would, but to just be in a space and to slow down and do nothing, to me, it needs to be a pretty fabulous space to want to do that. So it's really offering amenities that you wouldn't necessarily have exposure to in your everyday, but to make it as simple as possible. So we try and provide everything around that amenity, like with an outdoor fire pit, as an example. A lot of stays offer an outdoor fire pit. It's not uncommon, but you can elevate that just by offering marshmallows complimentary as part of the stay, or the ingredients that are needed to make s'mores and marshmallow fork. All of those small things then encourage a guest to not just light a fire, but to really sit there and have that moment of joy and experience that in a different way. So it's those little small touches that make a huge difference in how a guest experiences their stay.
Yeah, I love that. And personally, when I go to an Airbnb stay or a slow stay somewhere a bit off the grid or whatever, I love seeing just the simplicity of a bit of a picnic basket or a gift basket that might have some little different snacks or, like you say, the s'mores, supplies to make s'mores, or even a hot chocolate if that sort of suits the vibe and that kind of a thing, where you're not having to go do a trip down to the local supermarket to pick up supplies. You get there and that is there. And then, like you say, you're just encouraged to have that experience right there.
Yeah, 100%. And we obviously try to be just as descriptive as possible in terms of the experience that guests are going to get. But at the same time, it is nice to have a few little extras that come as a bit of a surprise for a guest. And especially if it's little things that they wouldn't necessarily consider getting themselves as part of their grocery trip, because everyone, if they're going to a slow stay, they're going to do a grocery trip at some point, typically before they go. And
Yeah.
having things there that they wouldn't typically pick up as part of that grocery shopping experience then feel like a little touch of luxury. Oh, I wouldn't have wanted to do this, but you enjoy it and you indulge in it. And then suddenly it becomes something that's really memorable. And often the things that are memorable are unexpected, right? So in your mind, you might be looking forward to the fact that you're going to be spending time in the outdoor bath, but in the end, there might be other little moments of joy that actually stick out in your mind a lot more because they're unexpected. And maybe they weren't even the reason why you booked the stay.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think Yeah, like for your outdoor bar, for example, might have a beautiful view, or if you decide to indulge in that as the sun is setting and you see the moon come up, and the beauty of that can create such a magical moment that you
Yeah.
didn't know you were going to have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And how do you stay grounded in the why as the brand grows and scales?
Yeah, I think for us, probably the why is quite personal. In Yost's last corporate role, like he experienced burnout. So for us, that feeling of being completely overwhelmed in a corporate career is quite close to home. And so we always try to balance that feeling of growing further and expanding with not experiencing burnout ourselves and staying true to the fact that if we're not grounded and living the life that we champion through our socials and the stays that we create, then it's hard for our guests to experience that. So, yeah, for us, why is being very mindful of the fact that burnout can happen easily and avoiding that at all costs and helping guests who come and stay with us to really rest and recharge. And I think that's one of the most rewarding outcomes that you can have as well is to see guests completely glowing and recharged after their stay. That means a lot more even than a glowing 5-star review for us.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I want to mention here that when you first launched, I remember you telling me the first slow stay, you're basically booked out straight away. And there's more that happens, like you've mentioned, behind the scenes in preparation, but then as you launch as well. And I'm really excited to talk about your new stay in Tansy. And you've had experience. I know you've had multiple trips to Tansy recently to actually get this prepped and launched. So tell us about that. This would be your third slow stay, right? And first one that's interstate?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and it was I think for us when we were looking for a property to have a third slow stay, we were really focused more on the actual property than the location of it. And we had been to New Zealand. We had actually never been to Tasmania, so we ended up viewing properties off of video calls and bought it
Wow.
like a WhatsApp video call. So when we settled, we viewed the property for the first time and experienced the environment. And obviously, we'd done our research. We didn't go into it completely blind.
Mm.
I remember we rocked up to the property the first time, and I turned to Yost in the hire car and said, we probably should have done a little bit more research on the neighborhood. Like, we didn't even know what the neighboring houses look like and whether that would match the aesthetic. We'd obviously looked at the tourist attractions and how to get there and the typical things that guests would value and look at. I think there's been a lot of learnings along the way of maybe we should have been a little bit more mindful of that. And we've lucked out that it's as great as it is. But the next time, there's some more considerations here, but we love a challenge. And for us, we wanted to expand in a way where the property itself felt like an extension of what we'd already built in the Sunshine Coast. And the third stay, Tears Rest, feels like that. And we've taken our time with it because, like I said, we had that moment of reflection where we didn't want to grow too quickly and lose what we had already built. But yeah, we've been live for 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks now. So it's all still very new, but we got our 12th booking today, which is really exciting. And we're learning a lot about how tourism operates there and how much that also differs from the Sunshine Coast, where we rely a lot more on travelers from Brisbane, from the Gold Coast, and it's a lot more local tourism. Whereas in Tasmania, there's a way larger segment of international tourism, interstate tourism. The tourism bodies are very different. There's a lot more traditional marketing on top of digital marketing being newer. So we're learning a lot about how to increase our visibility and to be present on the channels that guests are going to be using. So it's been great so far. Yeah.
Tell us, what sort of experience are you building there?
I would say it's similar to what we've built up on the Sunshine Coast. We wanted, like I said, we wanted it to be an extension of what we'd built. So we took what we're known for in the Sunshine Coast, so the outdoor bath experience, the pizza oven, and having that as a consistent experience through all of our stays. But I think what we did want to do is create a slow stay, but with a Tassie twist, as I always refer to it to my friends, because at the end of the day, you want to honor the place that it's in. And so for us, we wanted to work with local brands, bring in local brands. We've partnered with individuals from the local village to do the operations as well, which has been really rewarding for us, as opposed to going with a property management company, which was our initial plan, because we felt like that would be the safest choice, especially being completely having a property interstate. But we realized quite late, it was literally 3 weeks before the launch that we completely shifted gears from going with a property management company to working with individuals in the village. And I think for us, being able to have a strong say, but also to guarantee the level of quality that guests are used to through our Sunshine Coast stays were super important in that decision. And also because we are a family owned business, it felt like giving back to the community aligned a lot stronger to our values than going with a larger corporate accommodation provider.
Yeah. And so far, so good?
So far, so good. I think Tasmania has been more challenging from a weather perspective. And I think a blessing in disguise has been the fact that because we did slow down with the renovation, we've been able to experience all of the seasons before opening. In the Sunshine Coast, the weather's pretty consistent year round. Obviously, floods, fire bans, those types of experience come across. But in Tasmania, with the weather in the winter and it freezing overnight, the snow, how slippery it can get, there's so many more considerations. So for us, that's been a steep learning curve as well. We installed the outdoor baths and I had only used it once. And the next day I go outside and I see that the pipes have frozen over. And I just thought, what have we done? This was a smart decision. And I remember talking to the plumber and the plumber saying, but Esther, did you not realize that this could happen? And I thought maybe I should have thought more about that and how windy it gets, being the windiest state in Tasmania. There was just a lot more to consider, but taking our time allowed us to experience those different seasons and to build a stay that we feel matches what we've created up on the Sunshine Coast. But at the same time, it does feel even more elevated because all of the learnings through our other 2 slow stays, we've built into our stay in Tassie as well.
Yeah, nice. And I think travelers and visitors and guests, they want to support brands that are family owned and values based, but aren't corporate based, sort of a thing. And they are becoming more discerning over time as well. In talking about boutique tourism more broadly, are you seeing any particular trends or guest expectations coming through?
I think, like the question you were referring to earlier, there is a real desire from guests for more personalized experiences where they're feeling like the host is investing in them and their journey. So we get a lot of guests who are celebrating something special, whether it's an anniversary, a honeymoon, a baby moon. So showing that you're celebrating that occasion with them is super meaningful to guests. So sprinkling in those moments of personalization makes a huge difference for guests. But at the same time, I would also say with the market becoming so saturated over the last couple of years, the consistency that guests are getting through different slow stays it is can be quite different. And so we are noticing that that guests are becoming more skeptical about what's being offered. And I think a lot of that is also driven by hosts spending a lot of effort, some hosts spending a lot of effort on marketing, but the actual experience not matching what's being put out there from a marketing perspective. So continuing to invest in the slow stay and upgrading it, refreshing it, and matching the marketing material that you're putting out there is super important because if guests are having negative experiences elsewhere, they're coming with a preconceived notion. So we always really try to match any marketing material that we put out there. And then I would also say more generally in terms of how guests are searching, and I'd written about this on LinkedIn actually, is we're seeing a larger trend where guests are using platforms like Airbnb to search for their stay, but ultimately they're doing more research through social media and they're looking at whether there is a direct booking site where they can book direct as opposed to paying those third party commission fees. So we are getting guests that are finding us through TikTok and they're just using TikTok as a search engine and shopping on TikTok and booking our one of our slow stays through that, where they're obviously it's linked to our direct booking site. So being more aware of how guests are searching online and the platforms that they're using is super important from a visibility perspective and to ultimately keep
Yeah.
frequency high and to get those bookings.
That's awesome. I love that. I know Instagram too, in Google searches, Instagram keywords and things are coming up
Yeah.
now. Yeah, people are doing their research and they have the tools now to be doing that research where it doesn't necessarily suck a lot of time. So they're doing that.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And what's next for Nelly and Woods Collective Stays? What's the vision for the next few years?
It's a good question. I think one of the things I've realized over the years, and it's the same in my corporate career, is that you never really know where the next couple of years are going to take you. But at the same time, I would say that with my background in technology and how interconnected everything's becoming from a digital perspective, there is an increasing need to disconnect and to have that form of offline reset. So we're really keen to play into that even further. So we've got in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, we've got unused stables at the moment. So we want to renovate them into a workshops and elopement space for small, intimate gatherings where you can have that human connection and really build on the experiential side of travel that we've already focused on through our slow stays. But at the same time, we've built a lot and we're keen to share that with others. And there are a lot of hosts that reach out to us regularly that want information, that want tips, that want advice. We're looking at ways that we can get our voice out there, but also offer some form of consultancy to hosts that align with our values and what we've created to help them do the same.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And I think you're very well placed to do that. And then do you have any final sorts of pieces of advice for other Airbnb hosts and operators out there?
I have lots.
How long have we got?
But I would say it leans into what we've already spoken about. But don't be afraid to be yourself, to be authentic, and to trust yourself and to be confident in who you are and what you can build and your experiences, even though the market is saturated and that can be a reason to not enter the space or to expand within the space. At the end of the day, if you're able to put a really great product out there, you will always get customers who want to buy that product or to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to treat it as a business and to be present and be visible on social media, because I think there's still
Yeah.
a really heavy reliance on the marketing that these big brands like Airbnb do, but that doesn't allow you to communicate your story fully and to build those relationships with an audience. So those would probably be two key points.
So I think there's always going to be competition out there, and
Yeah.
the uniqueness that people can bring to particularly Airbnb stays or slow stays is what we say in the marketing world as unique selling propositions. You know, that something unique that you offer that nobody else does, and injecting your personality in there, and it is a way to bring that to life for people to actually stand out amongst that competition.
Yeah, definitely. Really agree.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Esther. It's been a great conversation. I am sure there's so many gold nuggets that people are going to grab from this and from our conversation. That if people want to find out more about Nelly Woods Collective Stays, where should they go?
Yeah, so we're pretty much everywhere that you'd want to find us, but you can find us directly on nellywoodscollectivestays.com. We've also got an Instagram, a TikTok account, and a Facebook page. And we've recently also started tapping into LinkedIn as a channel where we share more from a business perspective. Those channels really, we're all under the same brand name.
Beautiful. Thank you again. And if anybody, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in to Marketing Made Iconic. Till next time.